The day my mail stopped showing up, I thought it was just a delay, but what happened next turned into something I never expected, because this was not about a lost package or a late delivery. This was about someone thinking they had the power to block a federal service and getting a reality check that came fast and hard. So listen closely, because this story goes from a simple neighborhood problem to something serious very quickly. It started on a normal morning. I walked out to check my mailbox, and it was empty again, not even junk mail, and that felt strange because our street always gets something every day. I did not think too much of it at first, but then my neighbor across the street waved me down and asked if I had gotten my mail lately, and I said no, and he told me the mail truck had been turning around before reaching our side of the block for the past few days, and that was the first moment I knew something was off. Later that afternoon, I waited outside just to see what was going on, and right on time the mail truck pulled into the neighborhood, but instead of stopping like usual, it slowed down and then suddenly reversed and drove away, and I could see the driver shaking his head like he was frustrated. And that made no sense, so I decided to follow up the next day because now it was not just curiosity, it was a problem. The next morning I positioned myself near the entrance of the street and waited, and when the mail truck arrived, I walked up to the driver and asked him what was going on, and he looked relieved that someone finally asked because he explained that someone had been blocking access further down the road and refusing to move their vehicle, and he was instructed not to risk confrontation and just skip the route for safety reasons. And when I asked who was doing that, he hesitated for a second and then said it was someone from the HOA, and right away I had a feeling I knew exactly who it was. If you have ever dealt with an HOA, you know how things can get when someone takes it too far, and in our case there was one person who always pushed limits, always acting like she had more authority than she actually did. And yes, it was Karen, the same person who had already caused issues about parking trash cans and even decorations. She always found a way to insert herself into things that did not concern her, and now it looked like she had gone even further. Before I go deeper into what happened next, make sure you hit like and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because stories like this only get more intense, and you do not want to miss what happens when people finally face real consequences for their actions. And trust me, this one goes further than anyone expected. So I walked down the street to see for myself, and there it was. Her car parked sideways near the curb, blocking just enough space so the mail truck could not pass safely. And she was standing outside talking to someone like nothing was wrong. Completely calm, like this was normal behavior. I walked up and asked her directly why she was blocking the road, and she responded in that familiar tone saying she was enforcing HOA guidelines about road usage and unauthorized vehicles, and I honestly could not believe what I was hearing, because a federal mail truck is not an unauthorized vehicle, and this was not something she had any right to control. I told her she needed to move her car immediately because she was interfering with mail delivery. And she laughed like it was a joke, saying she would allow it once certain complaints in the neighborhood were resolved. And at that point I realized she was not just being difficult. She was trying to use access to mail as leverage, and that crossed a line that should never be crossed. I went back home and started making calls because this was not something that could be handled with a simple conversation. I contacted the local post office and explained everything in detail, including how the truck was being blocked and how it had been happening for days, and the person on the phone immediately took it seriously, asking for exact location details, times, and descriptions, and I could hear in their voice that this was not a minor issue. The next day, everything escalated in a way no one saw coming. The mail truck arrived again, but this time it did not come alone. Behind it was another vehicle, and shortly after that a police car pulled into the street, and within minutes the entire situation changed. The same spot was blocked again, and Karen was standing there like before, but this time she was not dealing with a frustrated driver. She was facing people who had the authority to act. A man stepped out and introduced himself as a postal inspector, and his presence alone changed the atmosphere completely. Calm, direct, and serious. He walked up to Karen and started asking questions about why she was obstructing a federal mail route, and she tried to explain it the same way she explained it to me, talking about HOA authority and community rules, but it did not work this time because he made it clear that interfering with mail delivery is a federal offense, not a neighborhood dispute. And the moment those words were said, you could see her confidence start to fade. The police officer stood nearby, observing and ready, and when Karen refused to move her car immediately, the situation moved from discussion to action. She was instructed again clearly to clear the road, and when she hesitated, that was when the officer stepped in and things became very real, very fast. Neighbors started coming out watching from their driveways because no one had ever seen something like this happen on our quiet street, and in that moment it became clear that this was no longer about HOA rules. This was about the law, and she had crossed into territory she did not understand. The inspector explained that blocking a mail carrier is not just an inconvenience, it can lead to serious legal consequences, including federal charges and fines and possible arrest depending on the situation. And hearing that changed everything. Her tone shifted, her posture changed, and suddenly she was trying to cooperate, trying to undo what had already been done, but by then it was too late because the report was already being written and the evidence was clear and consistent over multiple days. I stood there watching everything unfold, and it felt unreal how something so small at the start turned into something this serious, and it made me realize how dangerous it can be when someone believes they have authority they do not actually have, because that kind of thinking leads to decisions that come with real consequences. And Karen was learning that lesson in real time in front of everyone. What happened next was something no one on our street would forget, because once the report started, there was no way to stop it. The postal inspector stayed calm but firm and explained everything step by step while the officer stood ready beside him, and Karen kept trying to talk her way out of it, saying she did not know it was that serious, saying she was just trying to enforce rules. But the truth was simple and clear. She blocked a federal service and did it more than once. They asked her for identification and began documenting everything, including her vehicle position statements from witnesses and even photos of the road being blocked. And at that point, she finally moved her car. But it did not change anything because the violation had already happened and the pattern was already recorded over several days, and that is what made it worse for her. Not just one mistake, but repeated actions. Within a short time, she was informed that she could be facing federal charges and heavy fines, and you could see the moment it hit her because everything about her changed. The confidence was gone. The attitude disappeared, and she stood there quiet, trying to understand how things escalated. This far, but for everyone watching, it was obvious she pushed too far and finally met a limit she could not control over the next few days. The neighborhood was all anyone could talk about. People shared what they saw, and many admitted they had their own issues with her before but never expected it to reach this level. The HOA board quickly stepped back and made it clear they had no part in her actions and that she acted on her own, and that alone told everyone everything they needed to know. Me, it was a reminder that some lines are not just rules, they are laws, and when you cross them, there are real consequences that no authority in a neighborhood can protect you from. And honestly, it brought a sense of relief because things finally returned to normal. The mail came back on time, the tension in the street disappeared, and people felt comfortable again. If you made it this far, I want to know what you think. Was this just a mistake, or did she go too far from the start? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share this story with someone who needs to see it. And if you enjoy real stories like this, stay connected with Karen Stories Daily, because there is always another story that shows how quickly things can change when someone forgets their limits.